Prepare to become a zoologist in the world of the supernatural and horrifying. Today I've got some stories for you featuring scary or unexplainable creatures, some of which have some very sharp teeth. Enjoy these tales and be sure to share your stories with us at darkstories.org. And follow the Darkness Prevails podcast on Spotify or iTunes if you prefer to listen hands-free. Leave us a review on iTunes too if you can. Thank you. As for the answer to my last episode in which one of the stories was a creepypasta, it seems most of you thought it was either one of these stories, The Draggers, or I Would Have Never Been Here. The fake story was The Draggers. If you enjoyed that fact or fiction style of episode, let me know in the comments. Now, let's begin. Husk, from Robin. I'd like to start off the story by saying that I was, and still am not, a true believer in the paranormal. I always try to see the logical side of things. But this one time, something happened to me that I could not explain away by using some sort of logical argument, and I still can't even today, though I think about this occurrence almost every time someone brings up the topic of horror. It happened to me 3 years ago in the summer of 2017. I was 15 years old at the time. My school had assigned me an internship that year, and the year's internship topic was agriculture. I hated that topic. I'm not the type of guy that likes to do physical work, and at the time my stature was pretty weak, which just played into that antipathy. So to get to the point, one day I was assigned to clean out one of the gritters that the farmer I was working with owned. Now, a gritter is a kind of wagon for a tractor, with which cow dung can be applied onto crops. Sadly, there were these plastic cables which would get stuck in the mechanism and would lead to jamming. So I, the lucky 15-year-old that I was, had to rip them out with the scythe the farmer gave me. I drove to the location where the gritter was located, a relatively big kind of hangar structure, which was located directly in front of a forest, and beside it were fields with crops growing on them. Normally, it's a really average sight, maybe even a bit idyllic. The weather was perfect, with almost no clouds visible, and all the birds were chirping, probably because of that fact. Not a time nor site where you would expect something creepy to happen. Now, having arrived at the location, the farmer gave me the instructions on how to clean up the gritter with the scythe. Then he made his way back to his farm, where he had to get some work done, giving me around 30 minutes of alone time. Just me and my scythe and this dirty job I had to do. Around 10 minutes into the job, something happened which I didn't notice until around 5 minutes after it happened. All the birds went quiet. The surrounding area went completely silent as well, except for the wind, of course. For anyone that knows a little bit about animals in general, you'll know that when the smaller animals, like birds for example, go silent, something is around that they know is dangerous. Having now noticed the absolute silence on that almost completely windless day, I kind of perked up a bit, feeling a little on edge. That's when my body experienced something which I have not experienced until then and haven't since. My body and mind went into a complete alarm mode, and I was, for the first time in my life, feeling dread, absolute terror. It was like that feeling of being watched, having anxiety, and being on edge at the same time, but 1,000 times worse. It's not something you can describe to someone accurately, without them having felt it before. It's basically like trying to describe colors to a blind person, something impossible to describe with language. After having felt this absolutely horrendous feeling, I immediately jumped up and looked around, instinctively knocking the scythe against the gritter's metal walls to make enough sound to maybe make me sound intimidating to any potential predators out there. Which doesn't actually make sense considering I live in Germany, where the closest thing to a predator would be a red fox. Anyway, I was starting to actually panic. I didn't even see what was scaring me, and yet my body was still going crazy for seemingly nothing. This went on for the next 10 minutes. I was stampeding around the wagon, knocking my scythe all over the walls, screaming and shouting into the forest and surrounding area for anyone or anything that could be hiding out in these woods or in the bushes, which were lining the edge of the hangar-like structure. To my luck, the farmer came back at that time, and with him also came the sounds. This calmed me down a whole lot, and I was finally being able to control myself again. After finishing off the work I still had to do, I jumped into the old Volkswagen the farmer owned, feeling really perplexed. I hadn't found out yet what scared the heck out of me for the past 20 minutes. Now, this is where the story usually ends, at least the story I tell my friends and family. A crucial part of the story I don't and have never told anyone in person is the part in which moments before the farmer arrived, I glanced into the forest again, still fearing for my life, but not yet knowing what was putting my life on the line. That was when I saw the most grotesque thing I've ever, and probably will ever, see. I was now looking directly at a deer. Not the normal type of deer which you would see in a documentary. The deer I was looking at was looking pretty normal, but with one extremely crucial and horrid difference. This deer was hollow. The entire deer I looked at, the eyes, the mouth, everything I saw, was filled with emptiness. It was like looking at the husk of something which had once been a deer. Even though the thing didn't have eyes, it was like it was staring directly into my soul, and I felt the worst I've ever felt in my entire life. It was as if this husk of a deer was draining away my energy. I felt as if my soul was getting sucked into that awful-looking thing. And to my luck, the farmer then pulled into the driveway, and this deer husk literally vanished in front of my eyes. But that would not help a lot, because the image of that foul creature had already been permanently imprinted in my brain. I don't tell this story to my close ones, because I don't think anyone would even slightly believe me in what I'm saying. But nevertheless, I know what I saw, and I hope I never have to see it again. Something in Loch Ness, from Yes Lad. By now, everyone has heard of the Loch Ness Monster. There are always people who claim to have seen the monster every year, but after what I saw not too long ago, I now believe that what people claim to see is real, and that there is definitely something in the water. I was walking my dog along the edge of the loch. I had my headphones in, and my dog off the lead. I wasn't really paying attention to my surroundings. I was preoccupied with my phone screen messaging people. Then I noticed my dog was not walking anymore. He was staring out at the loch. His ears were perked up, as if he had heard something. "What is it, buddy?" I asked. Then I looked in the direction he was looking in, and I saw a ripple in the water, about maybe 30 feet away from where we were standing. The ripple was like something had just dove into the water. I assumed my dog must have seen some sort of water bird or a seal or something, which may have caused the ripple. But I never saw anything like that, so it could have been anything. I went over to my dog, clipped the head onto his harness, and went to walk away from the water, but my dog didn't budge. He was a brown Labrador, 11 years old, and he was in good shape, but I had never seen him so resistant to move, and he still hadn't stopped looking at the spot the ripple had been. I walked over to him to tug at his harness to move him from the water's edge, when I heard a noise. It was so loud I could hear it over the sound of my headphones. The noise sounded like the noise a whale makes when it comes to the surface to breathe. Instantly, I looked out at the lock and saw this object in the water. It had a pebble-like texture of skin, and it had the head of a reptile with light yellow eyes. I only saw a glimpse of it before it ducked back down into the water. I took a step back from the water's edge in shock and in awe. Had I just witnessed the Loch Ness Monster? For once in my life, I actually didn't know how to take this. Firstly, I was amazed at what I saw. Secondly, I was wary as I noticed that the creature was no longer where I saw the first ripple. It appeared as if it had gotten closer to where me and my dog were now standing. Now that it dove back into the water, I didn't know where it had gone. I did not take my eyes off the water. I wanted to know where the creature had gone. Almost 5 minutes passed, and nothing happened. Eventually, I decided that I would head back home. I pulled my dog by the harness, and he followed with me now, but he kept looking back at the water. My heart skipped a beat when I heard the same sound I had heard earlier. I turned to see the head of the creature fully out of the water, and only 7 feet away from where I'd been standing a few seconds ago. Behind the creature's head, I could see its back and the water running over it. This monster had to be at least 20 feet long, or it could have been bigger considering most of its body was underwater still. One thing I noticed about it is that unlike most depictions of the Loch Ness Monster being that of a plesiosaur, this creature instead had a slender body and not the large body that a plesiosaur has. It looked as if it had the body of a large snake or eel. The creature let out a hiss and yanked its head back, diving down into the abyss once more. Looking back on this event, I wondered if this creature was actually hunting me. As it was getting closer to me, could it have been waiting for the moment to strike? Maybe once it noticed I was out of its reach, it retreated to its spot waiting for another victim to strike. My only advice is to make sure that you keep an eye on your surroundings and to always expect the unexpected, because this world is a strange one. What was it? From Devo77. I'm a 43-year-old male, and this story happened in 1998. Even though it was 20-something years ago, it still haunts me. I always find myself locking my truck doors after dark, checking over my shoulder while walking through the woods. So in 1998, I was still living in Alaska. My best friend Aaron, who had moved down to Boise, Idaho 3 years prior, called me up, asking me to fly down and help him drive home. So 2 weeks later, I flew down to Boise, and after seeing some sights, a week later we start our trip back to Alaska. The trip up through Washington was amazing. At one point, we decided to take a shortcut up a deserted highway called the Caviar. Now, the Caviar at the time was dirt lonely and deserted of all traffic. At night, there was only one truck stop at either end of the highway. That being said, we had 500 miles of nothingness. Being young and not very smart, we headed out at night. It was early September, hot as heck, clear skies, full moon, a beautiful night for a drive. It was just 2 best friends and a dog, the 3 of us on an awesome adventure. I was the one driving while Aaron kicked it back in the passenger seat. His dog, Kia, was chilling in the back. We were driving an '88 Toyota Pathfinder, a 2-door. We drove for about 3 hours when I had to use the bathroom. Kia needed to go too, so I pulled over to the side of the road. Aaron got out to check the trailer and safety chains. I stepped to the front of the truck to use the bathroom, and as I finished up, I came around the side of the truck to talk to Aaron. That's when I saw that 200 yards away from us, something stepped out into the middle of the road. From that distance, I thought it was a dog or even a wolf. As I noticed this animal, Aaron also looked up, and he saw it too. By then, Kia was going crazy, barking and snarling and backing up towards the truck. Aaron and I noticed that Kia was acting scared, so we decided it was time to go. As I headed over for the driver's seat, Aaron jumped on the tailgate of the Pathfinder. That wolf-dog thing started to come towards us at a slow jog speed. It was slowly speeding up. I jumped in the driver's seat, threw it in gear, and took off. Wheels spun, gravel spitting in the air. We fishtailed, and Aaron was in the back screaming for us to go faster. Kia's in the front seat with me now, whimpering and crying. As I glanced in the mirror, this animal was at a high-speed run. I began grabbing the gear, slamming on the gas, flooring it, when all of a sudden this thing stands up on two legs like a man. And I mean it stood up on two legs in a single bound. This thing was running at least 45 miles per hour, maybe 50, on two legs. Now the truck was only a 5-speed manual. The creature was beginning to catch up to us. It was at the back of the truck, where Aaron was, and Aaron was as far back as he could go. That thing was now snapping and snarling at him. I began to swerve back and forth, getting the trailer to swing. It went back and forth as I tried to hit it. The whole time Aaron was hanging on for dear life, screaming at me to go faster still. This freaking animal started to catch up with the driver's side window now, which was down. Soon I could feel heat from the face of the thing as it breathed. I then caught sight of it. It was a dog or a wolf for sure. Blood-red eyes, jagged yellow teeth, snapping at me through the window. I was now leaning over the passenger side to get away from it, still trying to drive. I could hardly see where I was going. I prayed nothing jumped out in front of me on the road. We started to climb a small hill, causing the truck to slow down slightly. All of a sudden, we saw headlights coming in the distance at the crest of the hill. Someone was coming up from the other side. As the headlights landed on the animal, all in one bound it went back to all fours and darted off into the woods. The other driver began to flash his headlights, honking his horn, wanting me to stop. Calming down, I slowed to a crawl and pulled up right next to his window. The driver was frantic. His wife was on the passenger floorboard crying. I told him about what we had seen. He said that he and his wife had seen the exact same thing behind them when they pulled over to use the restroom. Aaron told them to turn around, to drive back the other direction, as it should be a shorter distance to the next truck stop, which would be about 50 miles or so. All of a sudden, his wife begins to scream and point over my shoulder. She was pointing at the hillside next to the roadway on top of the hill. There was one of those wolf-like men beasts standing up watching us. There were 4 others, 2 on each side of it. The other driver turned around and followed us down the road. When we made it to the truck stop, they continued on to a hotel for the night. Aaron and I went to the truck stop. Inside, we asked the clerk if he knew anything about the caviar, like if he knew anything about what was out there, anything that might look like what we saw. Then a truck driver that was sitting next to us in a booth said that there had been a lot of missing people out there over the years, going as far back as the 40s or 50s. Not many people travel that road at night if they're smart, we were told. Aaron and I got a hotel room for the night. We made it to Anchorage the next day. The rest of the trip was pretty nice. Like I said, it's been 22 years or so, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't jump at the noises in the woods, or the shadows cast by trees in the wind. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not a sissy or anything like that. It's just, I know there are things out there. I don't know what it was. Aaron still doesn't know. Sometimes we talk about that night, and even still, it gives us the heebie-jeebies. All I got to say is that you shouldn't underestimate what may be out there. There are things that go bump in the night. There are things that humans don't understand. There are things that hunt. But that being said, I still go out into the woods myself, to hunt, to go fishing, to hike with my wife and kids. But know this, I never go into the woods without a gun. Now, I know better. A Mysterious Encounter from Lady Shadow 91. This took place when I was 10. My brother traveled a lot and I usually got to go with him, as long as I didn't have school. I always loved those trips, and I got to see a lot of new places. Well, this trip in particular would not be like the rest of them. We were in Wisconsin, and we had taken a wrong turn. We ended up on the now famous Bray Road. My brother said he knew where to go from there and had turned onto that road. It was probably about a mile down the road my brother began to slow down the car. The road was dark, but he said he thought he saw something in the road. As we got closer to it, we realized we were staring at something both amazing and terrifying. Just in front of the car was a very large wolf. It looked to have dark brown fur, and it stood level with the top of the hood of the car on all fours. And we were driving a big SUV. It just stood there, snarling at us. My brother didn't want to hit it because it was so large. He tried to back up to go around it, but it began coming toward the car. I was so afraid that I was frozen, even though I had the car between us and that beast. My brother quickly took off and tried to go around it. As he got close to it, the giant wolf swiped at us and had left several deep claw marks on the side of the door. It continued to chase us and kept speed with the car going at least 45 down the road. It followed us until we got to the end of the Elkhorn County line. Then it just stopped and ran back toward the forest. We then heard howls fading away the further away we got. We assumed it was from that large beast. I've never seen my brother as scared as he was that night. I was afraid to tell anyone else about what happened, and I've never returned to Elkhorn, Wisconsin. I'm not sure if what we saw that night was a werewolf, or just a freakishly large wolf. Going off of its behavior, I've never thought it was just a normal wolf. Not only because of its size or the way it acted, but because there was only one. Wolves are social creatures that hunt in packs. For the last 19 years, what I saw that night still haunts me. The only logical explanation I can think of is it's either a freak of nature or maybe a dire wolf. My curiosity does not outweigh my fear of Bray Road. I will not go back because I'm terrified of what I might find. The White Fox from Tyrant-01. I'm no stranger when it comes to the paranormal, but this experience is the only one in which will stay with me for the end of my days. I am a 38-year-old man with a beautiful, loving wife and 2 beautiful daughters living in the woodlands of Colorado, in which I've lived in my current home ever since I was a young boy. I've always been one to love nature and animals. To be exact, I'll pet wildlife if I get the chance, while being safe, of course, and I've always felt connected in some form to nature. Every time I venture out and breathe the air from the woodlands near my home, I'm usually deprived of all negativity. Of course, with the help of the devil's lettuce sometimes. This experience happened to me when I was 16 years old, and this is by far one of the greatest but saddest events that happened in my life. It was a chilly autumn day, and I was extremely depressed. My father had sadly passed away a couple weeks ago, and for some reason on that specific day, I felt absolutely drained. The amount of pressure held within my chest made me feel sick, and with my head being bombarded with the loving memories of my father, it honestly made me want to end my life that day. But you may ask, what about your mother or siblings? Well, first of all, my mother was an intense drug user, in and out of rehab. I honestly felt as if she didn't care for me, and to make matters worse, after my father had passed away, she became someone totally foreign to me. And unfortunately, I have no siblings. So at that moment, my mother was probably shooting up and/or battling her own demons. I didn't understand, as sometimes I would try to do something to bring us closer, but she never gave the love I wanted or needed, and yet I would give her any of the love she needed. I felt so alone, and to be honest, I was. It seemed like my soul was slowly fading away, and my heart was broken beyond fixing. But I believe what happened to me in the woods was the beginning of my internal healing. Let me explain why. I decided to head to the woods, packing my father's old 1911 with a single round with the intent to end my life. I walked out the back door, wandering off into the woods without any hesitation. Though this is a tough situation already, I couldn't help but shake the feeling of being watched. But it didn't bother me. My mind was being drowned in malicious thoughts of self-harm. But as I wandered further into the woods, still feeling as if I was being watched, the nicely colored autumn trees, the sounds of my shoes crunching on fallen leaves, and the peaceful breeze actually brought a sensation of random peace and, oddly enough, safety. And like a miracle, my thought of suicide simply vanished. But that thought of me considering to end my life right there actually broke me. It felt as if my mind had been shattered into a million sharp pieces, in which I was being profusely stabbed with each. With haste, I decided to stop and sit down. I was near this fairly large rock near a flat opening covered with a blanket of autumn leaves. As I sat, I began crying, telling myself what was I thinking. My father would not want me to do such an act. How could I stupidly savage his honor? What would become of my mother? Would she even care? I wondered. At that moment, I was in a battle with myself. But for some reason, the setting brought peace, like I said before, and I began to think more clearly. While regaining a semi-proper mental state, I could have sworn I heard what sounded to be little kids' laughter from my right, from within the sea of trees. Also, I heard gentle steps crunching on some leaves behind this one tree. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw a little kid peek his head out from behind the tree, but it was too fast to know and comprehend. Not to mention, I was also tearing up, so I thought it could have been my eyes bewildering me instead. I soon realized I can actually hear the gentle steps, which seemed to be getting closer. Then, right from behind that tree, a white fox emerged. Its whole body was covered in pure white fur, almost blinding a little bit. I thought it was very strange. It got closer and I could make out that its eyes were both different colors. The left eye was an icy glowing blue. Imagine the eyes of a White Walker from Game of Thrones. Its right eye was glowing a fierce orange. It stopped roughly 3 feet from me and gave me a confused look. It even tilted its head. I was frozen by its beauty. I didn't even realize it was getting so close to me, until it began to sniff me. I took my hand and went for a pet, and by the gods, it allowed it. It even started playing with me. It was jumping up and down and wagging its tail. I was amazed by this, but then I turned away because I was still crying over my father. I once again burst into tears and placed both my hands on my face. But at that moment, I felt a gentle and fluffy paw on my leg. I looked over and saw the white fox was there, with the same confused look on its face. It proceeded to lick my hands and curled up right beside me. At that exact moment, literally all sadness left my body, as if the fox itself had taken it from me. right after curling up beside me. I was in shock. It then tilted its head towards me, and its eyes seemed to glow even more. I could have sworn then it smiled at me. Not a menacing one, but a peaceful one. It got right back up, and something absolutely weird happened. Something that will question my sanity. A whisper entered my ear. It sounded like my dad, but if he was a child. The voice said, "I love you." That whole time I didn't realize that the fox was staring at me, as if he was the one that conjured that voice. After that, with my jaw officially touching the ground, the white fox started to gently run back into the area it came from. Once it got behind that tree, silence followed, but from the corner of my eye, I could make out a small child peeking out from around the tree, and for a split second, I could see that child stood roughly 3 feet, had small curly hair, fairly skinny with tan skin, and had an icy blue glowing eye alongside a glowing fierce orange eye. Then suddenly, it vanished. The weeks that followed, I didn't stop thinking about what happened. I was in total shock. I did everything I could to see what I could have seen. Was it a wood spirit? Maybe a shapeshifter of some kind. Maybe it was the ghost of my dad. But I don't think it could have been that, since he had no affiliation when it came to foxes. The figure I saw was definitely a child, and to add on top of that, that child looked nothing like my dad, or how my dad looked as a kid. The best I can come up with is maybe it was a skinwalker, but I haven't heard stories regarding a child and a skinwalker like this, so maybe I'll never find out. But without that white fox there, I probably would have ended my life. So in reality, I owe that white fox my life, and I hope one day we can meet again, but maybe that time will be sooner than expected. My youngest daughter swore she saw a small white fox outside near the woodlines, and she mentioned it had blue and orange eyes.